So good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to another edition of Connecting Voices. At Connecting Voices, our objectives has always been to create a platform where legal experts, POSH practitioners, HR leaders, and business professionals can come together to discuss these difficult questions openly, learn from one another's experience, and build workplaces that are not only legally compliant, but also respectful, inclusive, and fair. For those joining us for the first time, I'm Yamuna Chengappa. I'm an advocate and a legal consultant, and I currently serve as an external member on the internal committees of several organizations across India. Over the last decade, I have had the opportunity to conduct more than 350 POSH inquiries and facilitate over 1,000 awareness and capacity building sessions. Through this series, my endeavor is to simplify complex legal issues and encourage meaningful conversations that help organizations move beyond compliance towards building a culture of trust. This season of Connecting Voices continues our journey of exploring emerging issues under the POSH Act and the broader workplace ecosystem. In our previous discussions, we examined the role of the presiding officer under the POSH Act and the unique compliance challenges faced by startups. Today's conversation takes us into a subject that is both common and often misunderstood: workplace relationships. The reality is that people spend a large part of their lives at work. It is therefore natural for friendships to develop, and occasionally those friendships evolve into consensual romantic relationships. The law does not prohibit such relationships. However, they can raise important questions around consent, power imbalance, conflict of interest, professional boundaries, confidentiality, and in certain situations, allegations of sexual harassment. Organizations across the world are increasingly reevaluating how they approach workplace relationships. At the same time, the law reminds us that every situation is unique and every complaint deserves to be assessed on its own facts, without preconceived notions or assumptions. Now, these are exactly the issues we hope to explore today, not to arrive at occasionally these friendships evolve into consensual romantic relationships. The law. Okay, sorry about that. So these are exactly the issues. How they approach workplace relationships. Oh my God. CV is coming back with some noise. Can we mute CV by any chance? Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So these are exactly the issues we hope to explore today, not to arrive at one-size-fits-all answers, but to understand the legal framework, the practical challenges, and the best practices that can help organizations navigate this delicate space with fairness and sensitivity. To guide us through this conversation, we are privileged to have with us two eminent professionals who bring decades of experience in employment law, workplace investigations, and POSH. I'm delighted to welcome a distinguished panelist. Shweta Sharma is an accomplished legal professional with nearly 2 decades of experience in labor and employment law, corporate legal advisory, and compliance. Beginning her career as a practicing advocate in the High Court before transitioning to corporate legal leadership, she has held senior legal roles with leading organizations, including HDFC, the Tatas Group, and the Birla Group. As an experienced general counsel and head of legal, she has advised senior leadership on legal and compliance risks while leading complex litigation, contract management, and regulatory compliance. She has also been an active member of internal committee across organizations and has extensive experience in handling POSH investigations. Beyond her corporate role, Shweta is a sought-after speaker on contemporary legal and compliance issues, including POSH, corporate compliance, and medical legal matters. Her distinguished career is complemented by national-level accolades in debating, moot courts, and youth parliament, and she has the honor of representing India at the South Asian Youth Conference in Japan. We are delighted to have her with us today. Please do join me in extending a warm welcome to Ms. Shweta Sharma. Now, our other panelist is our very own Sashayat Kritika R, a lawyer working at the intersection of gender, constitutional law, and workplace rights. Her practice centers on workplace sexual harassment, advising organizations on compliance, serving as an external member in internal committees, leading internal redressal processes, and conducting training. Kritika believes in framing workplace sexual harassment not merely as a procedural compliance issue, but as a constitutional and cultural one. Most recently, she served as regional advisor at the Center for Reproductive Rights, where she provided legal advice on sexual and reproductive health and rights across Asia. Prior to that, she worked with the Center for Law and Policy Research on civic and constitutional education, constitutional law, and gender and digital human rights. Kritika holds a BLLB from Christ University, Bengaluru, and an LLM in human rights law from Central European University, Vienna. Welcome, Kritika, and thank you for joining us. So let's dive right in. Sorry, I'm not going to be doing a lot of chit chat. We're going to go right into the questions. So workplace relationships are increasingly common in today's organizations. So Sweta, the question is for you. From your perspective, why is this topic often viewed as both a cultural and a compliance challenge?
Thank you, Yamuna, for having me for this session. POSH is a subject which is very close to my heart. I always feel, being a corporate professional since beginning, this is something I'm doing for since this act has been passed in 2013. Before starting and sharing my views, I just want to put one disclaimer that views which I'm going to present in this session is completely my personal views as a lawyer and does not represent my current or any of my ex-organization's views. And with this disclaimer, firstly, I should congratulate Shasha's team for taking up this topic. I have actually I've taken n number of POSH sessions in the past, but this topic nobody has taken up. At least it never came to me, or I haven't attended any session where this topic is being discussed. Whereas this is a very important topic, being sitting in the presiding officers, for several years now. This kind of issues comes up, and again we get into what to do, where we need to draw the personal or the professional line. So this takes me to your questions. There are two things. One, that it is a cultural issue, it is a compliance issue as well. When we say it is a cultural issue, it comes on organization. All the organizations, they always hesitate, or I would say that they do not understand that where to draw the boundary. Because once, if say suppose any organization is interfering, and rightly so, a person may feel that they are interfering in their personal space, because all adults only work in the organization. It's not that the minors are working. So any adult is working in an organization, they have right to choose partners, they have right to do. And I'm not talking about anything which is related to morality. That is a different questions altogether. But they do end up having, sometimes some individuals, they do end up having a relationship. Sometimes the stakeholders or the persons who are actually in the position to monitor such things, where like HR, legal, etc., it come into their knowledge also. But again, the question comes that should organization interfere, or they should just be like that, okay, this is a very personal thing. Yeah, it is a very personal thing, why should we get into that? But how it becomes a professional issue, for many reasons. If relationship goes sour, then it becomes a POSH case, and then again you are going back how it started, what was happening, then the evidences, then the witnesses are saying yeah, I was aware, etc. So it is not that it is completely a personal issue. It can become a professional, can become a POSH issue, and then it become a professional issue. Not only that, another point, even if it doesn't become a POSH case, but still, when the power dynamics plays. So if it is a junior senior kind of supervisor and reported relationship, others may get affected. So those issues are also there, that maybe those two individuals are in consensual relationship, but what about others? Because then the favoritism and other things comes into that. So to sum up this point, though it is a cultural issues, and then it may become a professional issue, so organizations should formulate their policies and monitor, but they should monitor it with a very limited scope. They should
Hmm.
also always be conscious that they are not bypassing their authority and over interfering in any employee's life, but avoiding it completely, having no policies in place, etc., and just closing your eyes by saying that it is a personal issue, what we need to do is also not the solution.
So kind of strike a balance between interfering and not interfering, rightly stated.
Correct.
And you
Correct.
touched upon some very interesting points, which hopefully we'll address as we go along. Thank you so much, Shweta. So, Kritika, I have a follow-up question for you based on what Shweta had asked, or what I had asked and Shweta had answered. So many organizations today are trying to balance employee autonomy with their obligation to provide a safe workplace. So, in your experience, have you personally handled matters where a seemingly personal relationship eventually became an organizational issue?
Yes, I mean, I can just add on to what you know was already said by Shweta. Just a few additional thoughts, which also would respond to your question.
Yeah.
One is, I think there's a reality that a lot of workplaces often hesitate to grapple with, which is that workplaces can also be sites where romance can happen. A lot of organizations are unwilling to grapple with that reality, especially in this day and age, right? And so I think that is something that all workplaces will benefit from to address it head on. And another point of view that I also want to offer with respect to workplace romances, which can lead to POSH complaint, and the unique sort of uh, factor which distinguishes this from the regular sort of POSH complaints is that um, the IC is asked to navigate something that is deeply personal,
Hmm.
um, and oftentimes emotionally charged, using legal frameworks that are traditionally designed and set up to tackle regular traditional sexual harassment complaints, right? So that is a sort of a interesting conflict that I have had to deal with personally, right? You are taking a socially beneficial legislation like POSH, which we all know the history of how it came about, 13 years ago, through the Shaka and all of that. And that socially beneficial legislation, we are being asked to apply it in a situation which is not that black and white.
Yeah.
So that was something that was very interesting for me when I thought about this particular topic. So coming back to your question, yes. So I have had to deal with situations where uh, there were situations where the complainant and the respondent were in a relationship, and it became a POSH matter. But not all the times will it automatically become a POSH complaint, right? There are certain scenarios that I've had to deal with, and also certain scenarios that come to my mind when I say, where the shift occurs, right, from consents to uh, harassment. I think the most important factor that we use to assess is the threshold of unwelcomeness at the time of conduct, right?
Yeah.
So what we need to see is at the time of the specific allegation that the complaint is raising, uh, was the unwelcomeness there, right? So that is a very important framework that we can keep in mind, an approach that we have to adopt as IC members. And some of the situations, like Shweta rightly pointed out, relationship goes bad, and then there's a complaint.
Yeah.
Because one is there could be withdrawal of consent, right? This is something that I've seen, where one of the parties doesn't want to continue being in the relationship anymore, and the other party is not able to take that
Yeah.
no, which again goes back to the topic of consent, right?
Yeah.
So the root cause of all of this, or the root sort of theme around all of this, like all POSH cases, also is consent. The ability to understand or not understand that, even if I'm dating somebody, that person has the consent to say, okay, I don't want to date you anymore. And have that respect, respect to that consent and stop. So some of the cases that I've seen is where that inability to respect the other person's, a decision to leave the relationship, which makes the other person feel unwelcome in their own workplace, right?
Yeah.
And of course, you have quid pro quo, but professional retaliation, especially something that we can see in relationships that are based in power dynamics, where one of them is in a superior power equation. And if the relationship ends, then there is, of course, a very high potential of professional retaliation, right? And of course, there's creation of hostile work environment. See, for example, two people might be okay doing things in private, but if one of them wants to bring that behavior back to the workplace, it can still make the other person feel uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
PDA, or any other sort of gestures, words, they might not want to be seen in the workplace in that light.
Correct.
Right. So what happens in private life also is, you have agency to decide how you want to be viewed and how you want to be treated in workplace as well. Right. So that is another sort of scenario that we can see. But very interestingly, something that totally misses our radar when we talk about workplace consensual relationships is, I've had to deal with situations where you have an employee in the organization who has who felt unwelcome because they saw two people who were in a relationship be excessively affectionate with each other, right? Be it physically or orally.
Yeah.
So that's also a very interesting perspective to bring, right? We always think of
we
the two
generally
parties
see
who are involved.
there's a victim and there's a harasser,
Exactly.
there's a complaint between them
Exactly.
both.
Yeah.
This is interesting. Yeah,
Yeah. So I've had
theoretically,
to,
we've
yeah,
read about it, but yeah,
exactly. Two situations. One is where I have, where one person, two employees were, physically affectionate in a lift, and then when the lift opened, another employee sort of walked in, and they were very uncomfortable with
yeah.
that. So that was one case that I had to deal with. Another case was, of course, on the office floor, where there was PDA, which made the other person uncomfortable. Another very interesting, of course, very recurring sort of cases which I've had to deal with 2 to 3 times is office parties or office retreats where two people are dancing in a way that makes other people feel uncomfortable. Again, these are situations which blur the professional and the personal, right? But we also have to be objective and see how, if it's an extension of your workplace, then all of the people who participate in such activities have the responsibility to behave professionally and make sure that they don't make other people uncomfortable. So this is again another interesting sort of perspective that I wanted to sort of add on, and personally had to deal with such cases.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Very, very interesting points, both of you. Thank you so much. So Sweta, in your opinion, do organizations have any legitimate role in regulating consensual workplace relationships? Or do you think such relationships should be treated purely personal matter? Like where exactly should you draw the boundary? Because you did talk about, you did touch upon it. If you want to go deeper, it'll be great, please.
Yeah, sure. So see, of course, organization do have a role, but it is very limited and defined by risk only and not morality, as I said. That what two individuals are doing, this is not organization's moral duty to say it is right, it is wrong, do this, don't do this. So it should not be driven. So organizations' interference should be limited and should be defined by risk only and not driven by the morality. So just to explain it, as I said, I touched upon it. So POSH does not prohibit any consensual relationship at the workplace. However, this is, organizations have a legitimate interest when there's a reporting relationship. Because if there's a reporting relationship, there are chances of being biased, there are chances of favoritism, there are chances of coercion, become a structural risk. So this is one of the scenarios. The another scenario is the relationship creates a hostile work environment for others. And as Kritika just touched upon it, that it is actually becoming a hostile work environment. So it is not only that person are feeling uncomfortable, they are also feeling that it becomes a very hostile work environment. They know that, okay, if I will say something, so say suppose if there's a boss and having a relationship with his junior, the other juniors may feel that, okay, their movement, it becomes restrictive, that okay, I can't say anything about her, I need to behave in certain fashion so that they get their space, etc. So it actually creates a hostile work environment for others. And also it affects fair evaluation, promotions, and team dynamics. So
Right.
if a person, definitely if it is a consensual relationships, etc., then it is quite obvious that a person will have a personal interest in another person and may try to promote or not doing a fair evaluation, trying to give the person more. So this also disturbs the team dynamics, which ultimately is affecting the organization's policy, goal, interest of being a fair workplace.
Yeah.
So, so a line, so as you said, as you asked, so the line should be drawn at disclosure, especially for the hierarchical relationship. That is most important, and the conflict of interest management, and not a prohibition. So we need to be very conscious as an organization that we are not saying that, okay, there's a sort of Hitler rule that, nothing of this sort can happen in our organization. Nothing. As I said, that we need to be very clear that what we are asking. So, there should be conflict of interest management, not a prohibition, and a blanket ban. Neither it is legally feasible, required, nor particularly enforceable as well. So, a disclosure and a reassessment of the policy is a cleaner and required approach in such certain situations.
Thank you for that. I just have a follow-up question on that, and either of you can take it up, or both of you can take it up. So you're talking about disclosure policies, right? Some companies require employees to disclose relationships involving reporting lines, or sometimes I've come across companies where if you're in the same team and you have a consensual relationship with another team member, then one of you have to move out of that team. So two questions here. Do such disclosure policies genuinely work, or is it that they simply drive the relationship underground? What have you seen? What have you come across?
So see, conflict of interest relationship, I guess that is the best possible way, because see, as I already addressed, that organization has its own limitation. As I addressed in my earlier question, that you cannot just say, okay, I mean, you cannot have this, or it is not right, or if you will do this, we need to part ways. Nothing of that sort can happen, neither legally nor it shows good on the organization's policy or way of tackling such sensitive issues. So conflict of interest policy, in my view, having a good, well structured, simple conflict of interest policy is one of the key factor. uh, Also this helps when, if suppose they disclose, and if they are into a direct so many big organizations, if there's no direct conflict, I mean, if they are not in the reporting structures, no, they do not actually bother much. It is just for kind of record, or many of the people, they do not even disclose that if it is not in the reporting relationship. However, if they are into a reporting relationship, this helps both the parties. How it helps both the parties, like organization and the involving parties? Because if suppose, firstly, organization knows that, okay, they are into a relationship, so they can structure it well. So,
Yes.
so other points which I said, that fair evaluation, favoritism, and that other hostile work environment, all these things can be addressed in a structural way. So that is
Right.
for the organization. What benefit, and that what I want employees to know, that what benefit they can get out of it. If they will disclose such thing, firstly, if anything will go wrong, as we all know in the POSH, when how this works, if there's a power dynamics, then
Yes.
case can actually go against the respondent, because
Yeah.
then it is like, other factors as mentioned in the POSH Act will come into effect. So if they are disclosing it, it can be, as I said, that structural changes can be done, and also in future, if their relationship goes wrong, if it becomes sour, then this will be taken into consideration.
Yes.
So it is a actually win-win situation for both organization from the organizational point of view, and also for the employees from their point of view.
Understood. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. So, my next question is for you,
So,
Kritika.
Yamuna, can I just add on one
Yes,
small
please.
point?
Yes. Yes,
So, I mean, I
Kritika.
agree with whatever Shweta said. I just wanted to add one point. I think, it's a great policy to have where you identify conflicts, beforehand and try to kind of address it, or try to design this workplace situation in a way that, you can take on these situations when they happen.
Yeah.
But one thing that I want to do is, that I want to highlight is there's often a risk that sometimes organizations may use this non-disclosure policy as a way to punish the person who might not have disclosed it in the past,
Mhm.
right? So that is just one sort of, of course it's good to have this policies where you disclose relationships, but it should not become, when there's a posh complaint later on, it should not discourage complainants from raising their voice, because they're like, oh, the organization has this policy, but I've not disclosed it. Now,
I'm
if I
not
come
disclosing.
forward with a complaint, then it's like a double-edged sword, right? On one hand, they want to use their right to kind of approach the IC and file a complaint. On the other hand, by doing that, they might be violating other internal policies. So, I think that is something that organizations
We
must
want to
must
highlight.
try and exactly address it and mitigate that risk, so that complainants are not fearful of raising their voice, despite having this
Noted.
consensual
Noted.
relationship in the past.
So,
So just wanted to point that,
So
yeah.
yeah, Kritika has raised a very valid point, and I would like to, just clarify the legal position here. No, policy can actually override the law. So whether you have this conflict of interest policy, you don't have conflict of interest policy, whether the employees involved has actually adhered to that policy and disclosed the relationship, all these things will not affect the POSH complaint. So even they disclose, do not disclose, POSH complaint will be taken up as a separate complaint under the law. So yeah, just want to make this point.
thank you. All right. So, Kritika, my next question is for you. See, consent is often spoken about in the context of workplace relationships. How do we assess genuine consent when there's a difference in seniority, when there's a power imbalance, there's a reporting hierarchy between the two employees?
Yeah. Uh, I think this is a very important question, because that it requires us to have a very nuanced approach in how we look at consent, especially dealing with situations where there has been a history of consensual relationship. One thing that I want to categorically say that is existence of past, romantic relationship does not automatically take away the right of the complainant to raise a posh complaint, right? Or existence of consensual relationship in the past does not mean that person will not enjoy the protection of the law and the policy. So lot of times people have this, confusion, or they're misinformed about this position. So I want to categorically say that. And just I want to use a couple of examples, and then hopefully through that I'll be able to respond to this question. First is, there was a situation where a manager sent several messages that to his reportee, late in the night, and these were not explicitly sexual, but they were of course borderline flirtatious. They were unwelcome. But the complainant at no point in time did not say, stop, I don't like these messages, don't message me late in the night. Or she did not say, I only want to talk about work things on WhatsApp. None of that was explicitly said. uh, but she of course did not also respond to those messages in the same manner.
Right.
She tried to, like, use emojis and double tap and like the message, and this said something generic. And while we were talking to both of them, the respondent used that as a defense to say, hey, I sent those messages, but I assumed that she was
Okay with
consenting when
it.
I sent. Yeah, she was
Yeah.
okay with it. Why did she double tap? There's a heart, image in the
Opt
chat.
scene. A
Exactly.
heart
It
means
was
love.
exactly. So she
Yeah.
hearted it. She loved it. She loved that message, right? So
Yeah.
that was, I mean, this is something that we keep seeing. This is just one example, but I've heard this defense multiple times where the respondent is saying, but she should have told me at that point in time, but she should have, vocalized her discomfort, vocalized the fact that she didn't want to have such conversations with me. So I'm using this example to highlight that consent doesn't always look like an explicit no, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't always have to be, okay, I don't like this, please stop. Not everyone, are in a position to vocalize it. Not everyone should be burdened with that expectation of vocalizing it so explicitly.
Yeah.
Rather, we should shift the burden on the other party to obtain consent, right? We
Yeah.
should not ask the complainant, she gave consent. Oh, how did she give consent? We should ask the respondent, how did you obtain consent? I
Yeah.
think that shift is very important in consensual relationships, also where there's a presence of power dynamic. Because
Yeah.
this case is very revealing because when we asked the complaint, of course, we were just understanding. She herself said, I couldn't tell him because he's my reporting manager. He would, if I didn't respond to him on WhatsApp, he would next day ping me on Teams with difficult projects, difficult tasks. So, she built that connection between her refusal to engage with him the way on terms of his engagement to retaliation at work. So
Yeah.
she was, and she's a young girl, fresh out of college. This is the first experience of how workplace is. So we can't expect, her to have that ability to say no, right? So this is something that as IC members, we have, as our workplaces, we have to recognize this, that consent, especially in skewed power dynamics, is a very nuanced topic, and we have to be very, very mature to understand that sometimes it's not easy to say no. And of course, silence also doesn't mean that they've given consent, right? Just because this is again another defense the respondents keep using. When I said it, when I did that, she should have raised her voice then. She should have told me she was not comfortable with it. She was just silent, or she smiled, right? A lot of times, people use smiling as a way to to avoid conflict, and I'm actually also somebody who smiles if I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So people have different ways in which they cope with situations of distress, situations which make them feel uncomfortable. So we have to be, as committee members, we have to be cognizant of that reality and not place a very high threshold on the complainant, but rather shift that burden and shift that threshold to the respondent in how we see consent.
Just
Yeah.
adding to what you said 2 points about consent, just adding a third point. It is that one of the biggest misconceptions about consent is once given, it continues forever, right? Legally and ethically, consent can be withdrawn at any stage. And that is also something we've seen across in quite a few of the cases. So yeah, thank you so much. Very, very interesting points. So, Sweta, I have a question for you. Right at the beginning, you were talking about favoritism. So, how should organizations deal with concerns around favoritism, conflict of interest, or perceptions of bias arising from workplace relationship? And is it to be considered as sexual harassment when someone says, you know what, boss and this person, boss is showing favoritism to so and so employee, so take my complaint of sexual harassment. So could you just, throw some light on that, please?
Just a clarity, you are saying that any third person is raising complaint that for two people are having the relationship,
Yeah.
that
So,
I'm feeling
for example,
uncomfortable
suppose
with
I come
favoritism.
to you and say that my manager is showing favoritism
Yeah,
to another fellow employee.
the women,
Take
and
my
that's
complaint
why
of sexual
it's
harassment.
yeah,
It's affecting me. It's affecting my promotion. It's affecting the
this
work
is
I'm being
creating a
given.
hostile work environment for me.
Yes, for
Yeah.
me.
Uh,
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that complaint will not be admitted under the POSH. So, we also need to understand what is POSH and what is non-POSH. So does it mean that a person is not having any relief under that circumstances, and okay, whatever is happening, let it be? Even if you're feeling uncomfortable, hostile work environment, your prison is being ruined because of someone else's being favoritized, etc. No, not really. There where the conflict of interest in the HR roles comes. So IC definitely cannot do anything. IC can only address the complaints which has been raised by complainant who has been victimized of sexual harassment, which is defined under Section 2 of the Act.
Yeah.
Now this third person, which is also having a very the person is having a very serious complaint, because just imagine about a situation, and I'm sure Kritika, we all being a the IC member, we had come across a situation where two persons are having relationship, and others, when we call them as a witness and all, then they actually say that yes, it was happening just under our nose, and I'm the one, I was not promoted because of that reason, or I have been given night shifts because other person has been there was favoritism for the other person, or I cannot, I'm actually, one of the cases long back, somebody told very similar situation. So we have called that lady as a witness, and she said ki I had two bosses, and that's actually remind me that she said I had two bosses. One is the boss, another one the person with whom he's having relationship. So you can't say anything to her also. So like two bosses are managing me.
Yeah.
Even she's coming and saying you do my work, and I was in need of job. So I know that if I'll actually upset her, I'm upsetting my boss. So yes, so all these things happen, which is rightly mentioned by you. But what is the solution? Is the solution that they should go to POSH committee or the IC committee, or they go and they should file a complaint under the POSH Act? Firstly, legally, that complaint will not be registered, because that doesn't come or fall under the scope of POSH Act. But then what is the solution? The solution is that go complain to your HR, complain to your ethics team with all relevant evidences, and that complaint need to be addressed accordingly in that in that area by these stakeholders, by these people who are the protector of the system, as we say. So these are mainly HR and ethics complaint rather than the POSH complaint. But yeah, I would like to add that these complaints should not, in most of the cases, these complaints doesn't have evidences. The person who is going through that will understand it very well. But if you will ask them that, okay, provide us the evidences, what evidence they will provide?
It's
As
not
Kritika was
tangible.
giving the examples, you cannot put that, you cannot keep your camera on, and even if you're keeping your camera on, that will put you in another legal trouble, that you are filming someone secretly, which is also not allowed. So a lot of nonsense are involved.
Yeah.
But HR, ethics, these committees, these people should take it up seriously. They should do the investigation by whatever means, evidences, and other witnesses are available. They should see that whether the distribution of work is fair or not. They should see that the appraisal evaluation is fair or not. So all these things will actually lead them to the conclusion whether the complainant who is saying that there was favoritism, hostile work environment, etc., whether that is true or not.
So basically, if there is any complaint upon on favoritism, it's not the POSH Act, maybe, and not the internal committee that will look into it, but most probably either the HR or the GRC or the ER will look into it under your policies, existing policies. But it's still something that will be addressed. Great. Thank you, Sweta. Kritika, this question is for you. See, the internal committee often have to distinguish between relationship disputes, misconduct, retaliation, and sexual harassment. Sometimes all of it within one complaint itself, right? So, have you investigated cases where this distinction became particularly challenging? Any case like that you would like to share with us?
Uh, yeah, I think let me just first go through some situations and then try and respond to your answer. One issue that makes adjudication of such cases where there's existence of romantic relationship in the past is sometimes disclosure from the complainant doesn't happen. It happens from the respondent,
Yeah.
right? Um, so it makes us, of course, question the credibility of the complainant, uh, especially when there is no presence of evidence, right? If there's no evidence, as an IC, we'll have to rely on our consensus whether we believe in what the complainant has said, whether it was consistent, whether it was credible. And sometimes I've seen where the disclosure of romantic relationship happens from the other side.
Right.
So in one case, I mean, which was, I think, sometime where these sort of distinctions blurred, was interestingly a case where the complainant shared with us screenshots of conversations where her manager, has explicitly made comments which are textbook sexual harassment, right? No black, no gray, black and white. And um, and when we met with him, so he shared with us a different set of screenshots with her responses, which made it seem that it was consensual. So when we investigated further, we realized that there has been some existence of other workplace harassment issues. So here was a case where there was existence of all sort of, not
Yeah.
just POSH, but also there was other workplace related grievance. There was shift related issues. There was appraisal related issues. There was, of course, we can't, villainize one party here, but there were like mistakes from both the sides. So it became that particular scenario with existence of all possible types of misconduct that one may experience at workplace, right? So what became important for the IC is to keep our focus on POSH and the textbook definition of sexual harassment, right? We had to filter out situations which did not contribute to or was a result of sexual harassment, right? So the reason why it becomes difficult is, of course, because retaliation can also happen because of POSH.
Because of workplace issues yeah.
Exactly. And also hostile work environment in itself is not POSH, but if it results from, a relationship that has gone sour, then it is POSH, right?
Yeah.
So what becomes important for the IC is to have this test whether, okay, the non-POSH claims or the non-POSH allegations, is it a result of or because of the alleged behavior which is sexual in nature? So I think that is a question that we need to ask, and not make the mistake of just filtering out everything which is not sexual harassment, right? We should also try and see whether there's a relationship between the two. There's a consequential relationship, or is there a relationship which which led to the other sort of hostility or other sort of harassment claim. So I think then we can bring it under our jurisdiction, right? So that is an important test that I would suggest we, as an IC member, we need to employ. And one more thing is, because of these issues, right, what I've seen is there's a tendency of complaints being delayed.
Yeah.
Of course, one is there's a fear from the complainant that even if I disclose of even if I disclose of our pre-existing relationship that existed, say, a long time ago, maybe there'll be a colored way in which the IC will look at my complaint. Maybe there's a preconceived notion of my of my nature, of who I am as a person, or maybe my grievance will be reduced in severity. So there's that misconception that a lot of complainants have, because of which they may not want to complain at the first instance where they feel unwelcome. They wait it out, and then maybe the sexual harassment per se would stop, but then the retaliation would continue, and then there'll be a breaking point where either they're on PIP or there's some other drastic sort of retaliation that they face when they say, okay, this is something that I cannot tolerate, I'll have to raise my voice. Right. And of course, as IC members, we have to see, that it's difficult for a lot of people to raise complaints and have that grace in how we address those complaints. But the respondents oftentimes use this as an opportunity to say, hey, she could have, if she had an issue with me, she could have raised it at that point in time. Why did she wait for 5 months? Why did she wait for 6 months? Right. So that is again another sort of issue that I have personally seen when it comes to situations where there has been pre-existing relationship.
Thank you. I'm just remembering this case while listening to both of you. We are slightly different because we've been talking about relationships between two maybe people of two different opposite genders, or where there is a romantic interest involved. And this case is a little unique because I've handled cases where there's romance, but then this case was between two girls who are friends, and they were really good friends. They would tell each other everything, and they knew what is happening in each other's lives. And then the complainant filed this complaint of sexual harassment against her friend. And what she said was that, like, say 2-3 months into their friendship, the respondent told her that she is bisexual. And then the complainant felt that the respondent was being overly open about her sexual life by talking about her, bisexuality. That was the first trigger point for her. And then she started looking at every interaction of theirs through that lens, retrospectively as well as, going ahead. And it took us some time to kind of wrap our minds around it because they're of the same gender, and one of them is bisexual, the other person is not. The other person has never told the respondent that she's interested in her or she's open to anything like this. But now she feels that because she's bisexual, she felt targeted. So we openly asked the complainant, do you feel this way because you have a certain idea about how people should be? You're biased against people who are bisexual or differently sexually oriented, not your typical heterosexual people. And then she said, first she said no, and then she said maybe. But still, we kind of looked into it, and some aspects did come out. But it came out like it was more of, she was very possessive about her friend, but not in a sexual manner. And we concluded it in that way. It didn't come across as being sexual in nature, but still it was a POSH complaint because the complainant insisted it was sexual in nature, right? Unfortunately, both complainant and respondent exited the organization voluntarily over a period of, say, 1-2 months. While the complaint was going on itself, the complainant said that she was put in her papers, and the respondent, we got to know later on, had also exited the organization. So I thought it was quite unique because generally we talk about consensual relationship, and you know how typically it is a guy and a girl, or that kind of a thing. So yeah, some unique case. So this question is for both of you. Maybe Sweta, you can go first, and then follow by Kritika. If you could offer one piece of advice to employees, managers, IC members on navigating workplace relationships responsibly, what would it be?
Policies. That is very important. And, the policies need to be very clear that what you want to know, what you don't want to know. And secondly, it should not, as I said, that you need to maintain someone's private space also. And at the same time, so it is only need to know basis thing only. That's also a very well framed policy. Another thing which I feel is for both organization and for the employees is transparency. As transparent as you will be in your policy when you say actually, and when you are communicating, if you are saying, see, there's nothing wrong, but we want to know so that we can take the necessary steps, especially in the direct relationship kind of situation. And for employees, that as I already addressed, that if you are being transparent, if you are disclosing the relationship in advance, it can actually save you from any future incidents of sexual harassment to certain extent. I'm not say, as I said, that sexual harassment complaint under the POSH is an independent thing. However, if you're disclosing it, at least organization is having a background to it. And so, yeah, so these are the two things I think organization and the employees, they should maintain, and that will help them.
Thank you. Kritika?
Yeah, I think just adding on to what Shweta already mentioned, I also would like to reiterate that disclosure is important. For employees, you disclose it to protect your rights, like Shweta has been saying, very vehemently since the beginning of our conversation. It's important that they preemptively protect their rights by disclosing any sort of relationship that might create an evaluative or reporting conflict later on, right? For managers, I think in addition to, of course, if you are in a relationship with someone you supervise, I think there should be, I think, first step to make sure that there's a cessation of that reporting relationship, because it's extremely unfair to date someone who you manage, right? So I think for managers, make sure that if you're dating someone who's reporting to you, disclose it and make sure you reassign yourself or the team member in a way that is not punishing to the person who's junior to you, right? And of course, for other managers, never ignore a power dynamic within your team. Uh, you know, if you see, because we can pick up cues, right? We can pick up non-verbal, verbal cues. If you're
Yes.
interacting with people on a day-in basis, people who are dating, you might have some sense that something is going on with them, right? So if you have those hunches, or if you get to know that there's a relationship between two people in your team, again, it will be good to preemptively evaluate it. At the same time, reiterating what Shweta said, you cannot moral police people in your team. That's another risk that you shouldn't, another trap you shouldn't fall into, because
Yeah.
we're not here to moral police anyone, but at the same time, navigate it in a way that balances, the team spirit, the rights of the team members, and also the other organizational sort of policies in place. For IC members, again, I want to reiterate that do not allow, prior consent, existence of prior romantic relationship predetermine your assessment. Sometimes I've been in situations where the other IC member says, "Oh, but they were dating. Oh, but this happened, that happened. So this
Some sort of
must just
unconscious
be
bias.
exactly. So this must just be a retaliatory case. This must be a retaliatory complaints." So I think we should not. We will be uh, not fulfilling our duty as IC members if we go and prejudge a case because of that pre-existing consent. And like you already mentioned, Yamuna, consent is not just, it's not perennial. It doesn't exist all the time, right? It has the ability to stop. All of us have the willpower, to stop consent, even in relationships that we are in, right? So that is something that I want to call out.
Yeah, one thing I would also like to add to here, Yamuna, that we also need to understand that who are in the responsible position to handle such sensitive issues,
Yes.
whether it is the IC committee or it is the HR or ethics committee. So, many a times I have seen, whether it is in the case of POSH or it is otherwise, like third party is feeling hostile work environment. So, it is a HR ethics case or it is a POSH case. What sometimes happens that the local, the manager or the colleague, they just get into that. They start doing the, initial probing into the situation, and then they come and say to IC that I got to know that this women has faced something, and then I did my investigation. This is what the finding is. So they are actually,
Yeah.
everything. I guess their CID instinct it just come up, which is good for them, but not for the organization,
For
because
the organization. Yes.
once they do not know, because the people who are sitting in IC, we have an external person, we have legal, we have HR, we have senior persons. They know that confidentiality is the key.
Yes.
Secondly, when you actually start talking to 2 3 people for this probing thing and all, then this entire sensitivity of the matter get diluted. So
Right.
whenever I take the POSH sessions, I always say that, when any local HR or any manager or any employee say, okay, if I get to know, or if I'm observing something, I need to do something. If someone is coming to me, I actually need to find out that whether it is happening or not. I said, no, it's not your job. Your
Yeah.
only job is to give, confidence to that person, that organization is having policy. I will, route you, or I will take it up with the
Take it up
concerned
with the
person,
IC. Yeah.
whether it's HR ethics or the IC committee, and that's it. Your role stops there. So do not, overdo your part in this entire process, because that actually dilutes everything, including the
Yeah.
confidentiality, which is very important for respondent also
Absolutely.
and for the
Absolutely.
complainant also.
Yes. One is confidentiality, the other is the scope for retaliation. Because
That's, yeah,
we've
of
had
course.
cases where a respondent has immediately got into action and suddenly
It
you see
happened. It
a
happened.
company
I
trying to
have.
take back their
I
complaint and yes,
exactly. So it
witnesses,
happened
attorneys
that
lost
by
time.
the yeah,
Yes,
it happened that by the time the case reaches out to IC, it takes
it's
up
all done.
that employee is already terminated from the system. So
Yes.
yeah, very well said. Yeah, it is actually can lead to such kind of retaliation as well. Yeah.
All right. So, in the interest of time, we're going to do lightning round. Quick one word to one sentence answers. So, Shweta, we'll start with you. One myth about workplace relationships that you would like to bust.
One, that if both the parties agreed, the organization has no role. That is something which everybody says, everybody follow also. But as I said, that the act and the organizational duty of care both say otherwise. So it's
Yes.
organization's duty to formulate a good policy, clear policy, and it is employer's duty that you come and you disclose. So yeah,
Thank you.
this is one.
Okay. One word that best describes a healthy workplace relationship.
Transparency.
Thanks
Just
for that.
be transparent. Both the parties will be benefited.
And one thing every manager should never do when a team member is in a workplace relationship.
Exactly the same thing, because many managers are doing, which I just addressed, that never be an informal mediator or counselor if any such thing happen. You have a
Yeah.
very limited role. If someone is telling you, they are telling you because they know you. They may not know who is your legal. They may not know who the IC members are. They are
Yes.
more comfortable with you, and hence whether they are talking about POSH, they are talking about relationship, they are coming to you. Your role ends once you intimate to the concerned person in the organization. So refer to HR immediately in case of relationship, refer to IC in case of POSH, and getting personally involved destroy neutrality and creates liability on you also. You can also be called as a witness, or you have breached the confidentiality, etc. So never do
Thank
that.
you. Thank you, Shweta. So, Kritika, your questions. One
Yes.
policy every organization should have regarding workplace relationships.
I think we've already discussed it. I think a mandatory disclosure of relationship or conflict of interest policy.
Okay. One sign that an issue is no longer a personal matter but a workplace concern.
I think the moment it creates a hostile work environment for the complainant, and it can manifest in, uh, the work outcomes, appraisals, team morale, or the individual's ability to not be a part of the team because of the discomfort that they face.
Okay. And one takeaway you'd like every participant to remember after today's discussion.
I think I want to go back to consent and I want to reiterate that I think the question that we should ask, at least when we're evaluating post breakup situations or post breakup, scenarios which may result in POSH is not the question, was this consensual, or rather, did this individual have the freedom to say no? Right. Especially when there's a power dynamic involved, just shifting that burden and shifting that lens in which we look at consent is, I think, important.
Very nice. Thank you so much. Thank you both for sharing such thoughtful perspectives today. Today's discussion reminds us that workplace relationships are not the problem. Unclear
Mhm.
boundaries, unequal power, poor judgment, poor policies, lack of respect are. Organizations must strike a careful balance between respecting employees' privacy while ensuring fairness, transparency, and safe workplace for everyone. On behalf of Connecting Voice team, thank you to our panelists and all of you for joining us. We hope this discussion leaves you with not just answers, but also the right questions to ask within your own organizations. We look forward to meeting all in our next Connecting Voice series, where we will explore more such pertinent topics. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Ina.
you.
It was
Bye.
wonderful participating in this session. Have
Thank
a
you so
great
much.
evening. Bye bye.
You all
Thank
too.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
See you.